Good morning, everybody. Many thanks for joining us, and welcome to Real Life Experience of Selling an IT Business. As you'll have just noticed, this meeting is being recorded, so I just want to make you aware of that. And as per usual with these things, we'd like to run a sort of Chatham House rule, so please feel free to share some of the insights from this webinar, but perhaps not refer to those people are just for the sake of confidentiality. What we'll also do is stack up the questions for the end of the interview. So if you'd like to put those into the chat function, we can then address those as we go through the session at the end. So my name is James Boot. I'm a director of Henley Business Intelligence. We've been partnering with Gary and his team for the last few months, looking to engage with business owners like yourselves and invite you to sessions such as this. So again, thanks very much for joining us. I suspect you've all had a call or two in the last 12 months from the likes of corporate finance houses, as the interest in tech businesses has only increased as we've all moved to home working, and the reliance on technology has become even stronger. That aside, one part of the story we don't often hear is the relatively unspoken part, which is the personal side of growing and selling an IT business, which Tim has done. And today Tim and Gary will be sharing their experiences of what it takes to do that, and some of the things that you may not have expected as you go down that journey. So I think as by means of introductions, coming to you first, Gary, please share who you are and perhaps follow on to setting the scene on what things are like out there in tech world.
Sure, thanks, James. So my name is Gary Smith. I'm the Managing Director of Venture Corporate Finance. We're a bespoke corporate advisory firm wholly focused on the TMT sector, mainly IT and telecoms, and mid-market, from businesses turning over circa £1 million up to 40, 50 million pounds. Market is really buoyant, and it has been for the last 12 months, really, even though lockdown and the pandemic has been the main talking point for most businesses in IT and telecom, particularly resilient businesses that have high recurring revenues. They continue to be highly sought after. They continue to be courted. As you said, there's lots of phone calls from private equity firms, from brokerages, from advisory firms, from lending people, lots of different people calling businesses to see if they're active. And if you look back at the last 5-6 months, particularly towards the end of October, November last year, there has been a real spike in M&A activity within our sector. So market's buoyant, multiples remain frothy, I guess is probably a good word to say, and we're looking forward to an ongoing improvement within the M&A field.
Over to you, and after your introduction, perhaps answer the question, why is everybody so fascinated with technology companies?
So I'm Tim Poultney. I used to run Veber Ltd, which was an internet service provider, MSP. I've sold about 6 months ago, and Gary held my hand through this process. I think from my perspective, the money in this is because of the recurring revenue and the way that businesses are built up with high recurring revenues allows them to be sold to other businesses that can then guarantee their income. And so for me, that was the key thing that I was trying to build into Veber before selling it.
Make it as attractive as possible.
Exactly.
It's something that we like to discuss today, much more around, the emotional side, with something that you invest so much time and energy and love and mistakes and all the stuff, it's a learning ground for many, MDs and CEOs of their own businesses. When you sell it, what's it really like?
So for me, the sale process was, I think it was fourfold. So first of all, understanding that I needed to sell the business. I think that took 6 months for me to get my head around that, and that was for many different reasons. I mean, I got to the point where I was no longer waking up wanting to go to work. I saw competitors eating into my marketplace and realized that if I sit here for too much longer, I will have bigger and harder competition coming past. Sort of reaching the peak of where I could take it before having to do more investment, and having people actually do a business plan check on me and saying, well, how are you going to get to this next level? What does this look like? And realizing that I didn't have the energy and the drive to take it to that next level and then be able to get a return from it. And so what I did was I got I got a sort of a business plan check, an accountancy check, a review of where my business was. And I had that done, and I could see this was the potential sale number. This is where we might get it. And that's where the worst case number. And I decided that that was a big enough number for me to exit. And at the end of the day, my belief is every business is only there to be sold at the end of the day. You know, a lifestyle business, whatever it is there to make money, but they are to be sold at the end of it all. So, yeah.
Did you settle quite quickly on the fact that you weren't going to go with the business, you know, regardless of a transition period? Was it quite clear then in your articulation to potential buyers that this is an asset that's for sale? It's not a continuance.
For me, I would find it hard working for another boss. I think there's that thing inside me of when I was the boss, I made the decisions, and the decision was I want to go left or I want to go right. If you're now, you know, if you sell your business and you stay with it, there is obviously, you know, you're going to get a salary, you're going to get a revenue, you're going to reduce your risk as the business owner because you're no longer owning it. But you then have that's that whole watching them split up or do things with it which you wouldn't normally have done. And that, you know, the trauma of selling a business, because it's at the end of the day, it's your blood, sweat and tears that's gone into it. It's your livelihood. You've risked everything to get it to where it is. And then to watch someone else go, oh, this has very low value, or this isn't what we're going to do with it. That's actually quite a hard thing to do. I made the decision before I even sort of engaged that I wouldn't stay with the business long term.
Yeah.
I, as an advisor, yeah, totally. I'll help advise. I'll give, you know, lead into the clients and do all of those meetings. But at the end of it, I didn't want to watch someone else strip it and knock it into the bits they wanted to use it for. I mean, you know, everyone has a plan. And if your plan is to retire and sit on a beach, that's one thing. If your other plan is to set up another business, that's another thing. But it is definitely building that out before you start the process, so you know the goal that you want to get to, and not sort of wander into it and then have someone make an offer for the business that you've done all this work on and then think, well, that isn't enough.
Yeah.
You know, set that number very early on of what is enough or isn't enough, and then stick to your guns.
Gary, it should never be a surprise though, right? It's not when the pen is about to touch the paper. This is something that the owner, he or she, should see coming and rationalize with themselves that this is going to happen.
I think Tim touched on a very important point. You need to, as a business owner, agree that actual fact you are going to sell your business. You've got something afterwards, that there is something which you can do after your business is sold. Many people, even if they get offered the right money or the money that they want for their business, if they have nothing else to go to at the end of that, you often find that the seller's remorse kicks in as they go through the final stages of the process, and then the regret of selling the business becomes higher, and the risk of exiting becomes higher as well. There's a multitude of different reasons why somebody should sell, and a lot of them comes with an event which is I can't take my business any further than it's going in. Competitors are coming in and eating into my lunch. My health isn't good. I want to spend more time with my family. There's generally an event that says now is the right time, and that event usually isn't a money-driven decision. It's a personal decision that I've taken the business as far as I can. I didn't think I'd be doing this for 25 years, or I've enjoyed the lifestyle out of this, but in actual fact, I'm still working 5 or 6 days a week, or 3 or 4 days a week, and in actual fact, it's time to realise my efforts over that period. So it's an important time. It's something not to be rushed into, because over the period of selling the business, which may be 3, 6, 8, 9, 12 months period, then you really need to be clear as to what's going to happen. The first question every buyer will ask you is, why are you selling and what are you doing next? And you need to be clear that, and that's just being clear and fair on yourself as well, that you actually know that.
Have you seen that change in the last year with what's happened in the UK, and elements of fatigue, changes of priorities, the cash value to go and accelerate the retirement, because we've all had this sudden realization that life is a little bit shorter and there are things that we can't control? Have you seen like the ratios or dynamics change of what business owners are talking about as their main driver?
I think business owners in the last 12 months, 14 months have had some of those issues heightened more than anything else. So people issues are one of the key things that we talk about when we're talking to shareholders, and why you're looking to leave. It's because of the people. They don't want to be managing people anymore. They want to go into a property portfolio or something else, or they've seen the business has supercharged way beyond what they thought it would do, because they've got hosted, or they've got new revenue streams coming in because of the pandemic, and now is the best time to sell, because they probably won't be able to have another uplift the way it's going. So it's not been a deciding factor, but it's certainly given more options and more cause for thoughts and consideration.
Yeah. Tim, for you, someone telling you what your business is worth, and if it is a number that satisfies, can accelerate that thinking. As we touched on at the beginning of the webinar, business owners are being provoked into these type of thoughts because the market is so good. Mm-hmm. It might not have been a consideration, but actually, by the way, do you realise how much your house is worth? Yep. Next door neighbour just sold for £1 million. Do you realise? Has that changed? And how quickly does someone need to catch up with the fact that yesterday they were happy running the business and tomorrow they're actually a seller?
I think there's an emotional process you go through. I don't actually think it's days. I think it's weeks and months that you go through this process. I would say, as being someone that sold his business, the review process that I did of what I actually have and the value and the number that we were looking at, that allowed me to get my head around what it felt like, what it feels like for someone to give you a value, what it feels like to realize that, all of those processes and things you've been fighting for, are they relevant or are they not relevant? But it also allowed me to see how good my business was. So, and by that, I mean that the actual business itself, of the processes and the accounting and, all of the things that we'd put in place to make the business more valuable, then helped make the business more valuable when we sold it. And that, there was a big, well, if it wasn't doing all of this, then it would be worth £1 million less. And that's the thing. And I suppose my one point is, there is never a big enough number that you go, yes, that's worth loads more than I thought. It's always like, okay, I'd wanted 10 million, but I got 5, but the realism is if each person's real with themselves and what they need and what they want and what they need to get to that, if you want to just sit and play golf every week, then you've got a number in your head. But keep a focus on that and not on the big numbers that people band around, because there is all the other side to it, which is, we all need to live, and life is more important.
True. And Gary, we touched on this when we've spoken in the past, but different amounts of money mean different things to people around the table. You know, a retirement amount or a new kitchen, you know, it's a different thing. So, you know, from your experience, you know, it's a conversation. Once you've opened it, it's hard to backtrack. You know, you've asked your management team and your shareholders, what if we did this? You know, we've been approached, you know, so that's a business discussion, but it suddenly becomes a very personal, individual discussion. So what does that look like? You know, that first venture into, right guys, we might sell.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised. Most entrepreneurs who are looking to exit aren't looking to become, most of them will become multimillionaires through their exit process. But what they're not looking to become is super yacht rich. They're looking at their future, as Tim said, and going, right, okay, then if we exit my business now, can I maintain or slightly improve my level of living and luxury that I've got, my cars, my airplanes, my helicopters, whatever they have in their lifestyle? Can I maintain that from what I've built so far? Yes, what the exit value will give me X, Y, Z. That allows me to maintain that. So that's more and often not the case. The valuation of the business doesn't mean to say it's the valuation in the market of the business. It's the valuation that they're looking for their business, for them personally. And then that'll be the conversation that triggers from there that, yes, this ticks my box. I can continue doing this. We also want maybe to buy a holiday abroad or a holiday home abroad, or we want to do something else, or there's some other luxury things that we want to do. But they often do not become super extravagant individuals.
And, you know, making sure that those around them, you know, can get their equal reward, because, you know, there'll be, you know, you've got to pay the bank back. There'll be certain thresholds and ratchets and all that kind of stuff that need to be worked through. So, Tim, in your experience, how technical did the process become, and did that impact on your ability to how you felt about the business as you became quite clinical with the due diligence, the data room? Did you feel yourself almost parting ways with the company even more because you were on that road?
So for me, because I got my head round selling it, I knew that there would be a process in selling it. Because I'd started that 6 months before, I'd started to feel like I could see like light at the, I'm going to say light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not light at the end of the tunnel. It was toys at the end of the tunnel that I would then have access to, you know, new houses, new cars, whatever it is. Because I had that on one side, I could make the decisions on the other side. And that, I suppose, also allowed me to do all the planning for the business. So if a member of staff wanted to leave, I no longer needed to fill that position because I knew I was going to sell the business. So I then had more cash becoming available, and I changed my whole investment strategy within the business. So I reduced the whole lot, and all of a sudden the business was significantly more profitable because I was no longer buying for the future. I was investing for the next 6 months, 12 months. I was filling those things in. So did it change my mindset around it? No, I'd already got to that point. I think there was pain around some elements where I'd invested large amounts of money and I was told they weren't worth a lot. And that came out through the, you know, putting all the data into the data room. But I suppose, yeah, because it's hard because I'd done a lot of the process before starting, because again, I'd done the review. I gathered most of that information within the review, so it wasn't from cold. And I suppose that's the difference between if I tried to sell the business without someone sort of holding my hand through the process, which Gary did, and sort of if I'd done it blind on my own. If I'd done it blind on my own, it would have taken 2 or 3 times longer, because I wouldn't have had that person going, what's this, what's that, why have you got that, what's, you know, and helping me through that process. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers the question.
No, it didn't. I suppose as you're discussing it with your shareholders, and Gary, you'll have seen this,
My hand is still sore, Tim. My hand is still sore.
Yeah, is there an element to your role, Gary, of mediation with shareholders that maybe wholeheartedly disagree with the decision, and sadly the percentage of the business they own might not actually support their opinion because they're a minority and or they don't have their voting rights or whatever it might be? But do you find it's those early stages are about getting the message across, perhaps to the team, on the direction, and this is a done deal, this is going to happen, this is what their involvement is, and helping that part, not just the owner?
I think there's 2 points to it, James. First of all, it's we always recommend as little people to know that the business is going to be sold as possible. The more people that know about the business being sold, and Tim is very open and honest with his team, and he can talk about their feedback. But what we see happening time and time again is the more people you involve in the process of exiting, particularly from a shareholder, the more resistance, risk, and painful feedback comes back to the shareholders. The people in the business often or not see a bigger buyer coming in to look at their business. They may be breaking it up. Some people may be losing their jobs. Some people may be being promoted. But whatever will happen, there will be change. And that change, after being in a business maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years, is going to be a big step for a lot of people. That also can lead to a lot of risks. We sold the business a couple of years ago where, as part of the proposition, the sales director was going to take the step up to managing director. But the bigger business, looking at him and then interviewing him and going through the DD process with him, he got a bit of cold feet, realizing he's going to join a business 5 times bigger and going to play golf on a Wednesday and getting drunk on a half day on a Friday was off the table. So he resigned halfway through the due diligence process. That then impacted the confidence of the buyer into the seller. It impacts the business moving forward, because if the sale doesn't go through, then you don't have a sales director. So the least amount of people knowing is beneficial, just to maintain the business, maintain the forward momentum. The business won't be sold until the SPA is signed, and until that point, it's still the shareholders' business, and they still have a business to run. So I'd always recommend that the least amount of people know, the better. And then the second part, which is about the process, Tim touched on it at the very beginning. The process for Tim as an entrepreneur shareholder of his own business, he can take a left, he can take a right, he can take whatever decision he wants. He's the person who's driving the car, going the direction, making the mistakes that he wants to make, and then rectifying them. In a sale process, you get to drive the car all the way up to heads of terms, and the buyer and the seller are all happy. You're getting the offer. You're talking about great things about the business, what they can do with the business, what they can do with the customers, and what they can do with your people. So it's all great. As soon as heads of terms is signed, the owner of the business doesn't take a step to the passenger seat. He actually takes a step to the back seat, and the buyer actually takes the driver's seat. And usually we sit in the passenger seat at that point. And then, just as Tim said, they start asking lots of questions, they start going into lots of detail. They bring up areas which maybe ask the same question from the finance person, the legal person, the tax person, and it becomes a great big process of what is your business really looking like in an 8 to 10 week period. That becomes an emotional process for the seller. They're getting put under a lot of pressure. They've still got to run their business. They've still got to field these questions. They've got people asking, why are people asking all these questions going on in the business? And they lose control. And for a lot of shareholders, that loss of control is very hard. They're always trying to get back into that driver's seat from heads of terms to completion. They're always looking to try and get that bit more of control, that bit more of, no, I'm not giving that information. I've given that already. But in actual fact, you still have to give the information. It just is the way it is. The debate about kit, the debate about equity bridges and net working capital, they're all things which are part of the process. They're not there to chip you. They're not there to purposely pick holes in your business. They're just part of a process of a buyer trying to understand and unpick 20 years of understanding. And that's what becomes a real part of the emotional process. You never step back as a seller into the driver's seat. You might come back into the passenger seat when you get to the SPA, but that's kind of the most control that you've got, and control is a big thing for entrepreneurs who've had it for 20 years.
Yeah, and in terms of when someone starts painting and decorating their house to prepare it for sale, they actually start falling in love with it again. They just think, actually, this is quite a good business. I could probably, stretch this for a little bit longer. But I suppose, Tim, for you, when we prepared for the call, you touched on having good controls, good housekeeping, because people are coming in to delve, right, and look in drawers and find things. So what was that part like, the actual kind of the real deep dive into something you just grown passively and put good controls in, but were they up to scratch, and did you have to kind of get things sorted pretty quick?
I suppose I'd done quite well, because I had gone through a process over the 3 years before of getting a mini board and contractors in to help get the right documents built, the right processes built within the company. Yeah, I think we had most of the documents. They were in a different format to what people wanted, or we were asked for them, as we say, 3 or 4 times, which can be frustrating when it seems obvious that it's not necessarily being, they're not asking the questions from one point. What they've done is gone to the heads in their business and gone to the technical head and the accounting head and the legal head, and the legal head is asking you about where your DR site is, and then finance ask you where your DR site is, and then you're sat there going, but I've explained it all. So
is it frustrating? Is it
frustrating? I wouldn't say necessarily frustrating. I would just say it's energy sapping, because the answer is it's over there, and I know where it is, but you need the documents to actually explain that, and that's all part of the due diligence phase that the buyer is putting you through. They're trying to understand, have you really got this? Is it what it says on the tin? And is there any value in this, or are you actually blagging it?
Yeah, it becomes difficult. I've interviewed a lot of private equity backed CEOs in my career, and a fair few of them said they felt the questions were just trying to get ammunition to chip the price.
Yes.
Because it's all about value and price, and it's the game.
It is, and that goes back to that very first thing I said, is you set your price and you stick to it. And if you go into this thinking that I'm going to get 10 million and your business is actually only worth 5, and you spend that 10 million mentally before you get there, it's a painful come down. Whereas if you enter the process and go, I just want a new house and it's worth, 2 million. Then when you get 3, you're really happy. I think everyone wants a bargain, and every managing director has to remember, they don't buy off their suppliers and just pay the asking price on everything. You don't go to the car shop and go, oh, I've seen that nice new Audi, I'm going to pay list price for it. You will always try and get what you believe to be a deal. And it's the same when you're selling your business. The buyer is looking for a deal. They're looking for that thing. There is good and bad buyers, and that's something to be very honest about. If someone is thinking they're buying you in a fire sale, they're going to offer less money. If they believe that they see a business that's growing, that has value, and the clients are happy, they will pay significantly more because they want to add that to their business portfolio,
which they're all doing right now. But
exactly.
Gary, how hard is that line? And as the advisor and someone that is steering clients towards a successful sale, that number has to flex perhaps if actually the buyers put up some reasonable argument around they've dug and they've found a couple more skeletons. Yeah. When does it become, how do you keep it from being a personal conversation and it is just business?
Well, it always is business. That's the point of having an advisor in the middle. It's the mediation of Tim being able to get some frustration off his chest because he's been asked the same question 3 times by 3 different companies, and he's got 5 tenders to do for his business, and he's got the accountant complaining about something or other, etc. So he's got a business to run. So he needs that barrier to be able to help him express himself, and the buyer also needs us to help explain that it's not a purposeful, it's not a chip, it's a process that they're going through, and they've got probably a detailed Excel M&A spreadsheet that they're putting numbers in, and this is what the outcome comes out here. So most good buyers would rarely chip. Businesses which are well prepared for sale rarely get chipped. There are, as Tim said, some notorious buyers out in the marketplace that'll offer a price and then reduce it halfway through due diligence because they either haven't done their thought process up front, or they're just trying to take you off market and hope that you'll take a lower price later on down the process. But that's where a good advisor comes in. Who are the people who have a track record of achieving the 100% earnouts, who've got a track record of high ethics in terms of the process, and how do we help support that through that by ensuring that Tim is, or any business owner is prepared before you even hit heads of terms, having the data room open, reviewing the documents, sense checking the information before you put your information memorandum together, mitigating as much of those obstacles as possible. There's always obstacles in due diligence, and you can't mitigate against everything. That's why these buyers spend a lot of money, 50, 60,000 pounds on due diligence, so they can really go into the micro detail. But a lot of them aren't red flags. A lot of them are for discussion and thoughts, and a lot of them actually are for interpretation. What does this actually mean? At times it can look like it's a big finger pointing at the shareholder saying, oh, I don't know if I believe what you've said there. It's a case of, can you just explain this in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, do you find that with buyers that are perhaps quite agnostic, or say private equity investors that don't particularly look for these businesses one after the other? They dip between sectors. Does that style change, and do you find you often let them off because you're having to explain things that they might not have a technical specialist for? But if you're selling to a trade buyer, would you expect the line of questioning to be different?
As a trade buyer will know the type of business a lot more. They'll understand the synergies they're getting out of the business, and they will be able to understand the positives and negatives beyond the black and white line. Whereas a private equity buyer, they are backed by financial institutions. Their investments have to be ticked off at a higher level. They have to pass a number of hurdles themselves to be able to authorize the release of funds and acquisitions. So their DD is a lot more detailed, and their questions are a lot more detailed, and their thought process and rationale and maybe scope for what they can allow and what they can't allow in terms of amber points and red flags for the business is a lot more restricted. So it's just understanding that and working your way through it. But a lot of the time, the obstacles are there to be explained and talked through between both parties, and having the buyer and the seller communicate together throughout the process only helps, because you then get a relationship built up. As you go further down the process, there's more of a shared risk because both of you are spending on the external fees of tax and legal, and there's a more of a want to complete the deal and look at compromises as you go through to the final parts.
Tim, coming to you. So the ink's dry, the number's been agreed, and you're leaving. Your emails stop and the phone stops. Regardless of preparing for the separation, what was that moment really like? And how prepared were you for, it to stop?
For me, I was actually quite prepared. Because again,
Brilliant.
because I
Did
don't.
it really stop, Tim, though? Did it really stop?
This is the thing. I think the strangest moment is actually when you get the call from the solicitor saying it's happened. And there's no like, yay! Because
it's just like, oh,
you signed all these documents. There's been lots of racing around, pushing. Did the money get there? Is everyone ready? Is everything in place? And it's not like someone walks in and puts a big wad of cash on the table and goes, there you go, that's what you've got. You are, you're still thinking about the deal that you were working on last week. It's still in the back of your head. Oh, I've got that, and that to do. And so it's almost like this thing of just, it just happens, but your brain hasn't accepted it. You wake up the next morning at the same time. You pick your phone up to look at things. I moved my mobile phone. I changed my email address 6 months before personally. But you're sat there and your email account goes and you didn't do the prep work and tell EDF that you were changing, and now they're like sending your electricity bill to your corporate account, and you've got no access to it. Or that client that hasn't been informed phones up and goes, oh, I want to buy this, that all that's like the first 2 weeks you're still fielding the business, and then you realize, why am I doing this? What's in it?
It's not paying me. And
I've not got anything from this.
What about the press attention or peers from the sector who see it announced in real deals, whatever it might be? Oh, hello, Tim's got some cash now.
Yeah, I suppose for me, there wasn't any of that, because that's down to your buyer wanting to release it, and they'll use that when they want, they want something in the market. So it actually might not get announced instantly. It might take time. Obviously, if you're being bought by a FTSE 100 company, they've got to report things in a certain way and all the rest of it. But honestly, it was like a big
anticlimax.
Yeah, it was like a big relief, anticlimax. Just, for me, we took a picture. The whole team, we stopped, we took a picture. Everyone picked their bits off their desk and left. And I was left in an empty office with a load of boxes on the floor because the people buying me didn't want the office. And, I just looked around and I thought, I picked those desks. I picked those TV monitors, but none of it's mine anymore. None of this is mine. It's all now someone else's. And that was it. It was walk out the door, it's almost hand back the car keys to your company car or your, whatever it is. And that evening you sit down and think, I can't log into the VPN and work. I haven't got to pick up these emails. Yeah, I don't need to check the bank. I'm not checking on what's happening in finance. What is this thing called TV? Let's have a look.
And 60-inch plasma.
Yeah. And it's funny because you realize how much of your life was your work, and how you grade yourself against how successful your company is and who you are in society, and how that's your definition. You're, at the golf club, you're Tim that runs this business, and that's what you were. Now you are just, there's a guy called Tim, he drives that car. You're not connected with anything. And it is a bit strange.
Many cars.
Yeah.
he's Tim 12 cars Poultney.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, James, there's one thing to bear in mind. Selling your business is a highly stressful process. You're negotiating your obstacles, you're running a business, you're managing people, you've got all the pressure of what happens next to your people, and they want to know what's happening to them next, etc. So by the time you get your share purchase agreement signed, more often than not, it's a relief that the process is over, or the death by 1,000 cuts is over. Then you get one tranche of money, but you also have, more often than not, you've got another 12 or 18 months to wait for the other tranche of money. So there's hundreds of thousands of pounds or millions of pounds waiting for another 12 or 18 months that you still have to focus on and work on. And then in 30, 60 days, you still have your completion balance sheet to go through. And that could be hundreds of thousands of pounds as well. So the event of actually selling your business is just another step in the process. And I've not been with any business yet, and it's not because we've not been successful. It's not because we've not delivered fantastic outcomes, but I've not been with a business where we've popped champagne when the SPA is signed and we've high-fived. It's right, okay then, right now I've got to do this, and now I've got to do that, right, we've got to get this done now in 4 weeks time, now we've got to get this right, let's make sure that we're ready for the earn-out period or the deferred income period, etc. So it is just another step. It does hit a couple of weeks later, and look what I've done after the work and effort I've put in. I'm now got this, and I've got these options going on for me, and that feeling gets stronger and stronger as your options open up. But also, I know many entrepreneurs who are heavy into the supplier events and the golf days and off to comms vision and all these things, and all of a sudden they just stop because you don't have any, not value is the word, but you're not buying from them anymore, so they don't need to keep in contact with you.
Now your purpose changes.
Yeah.
And you have to, that's probably something you have to settle quicker is, yeah, I'm financially stable, but if I pull up to the office tomorrow morning and try and open the door, people are going to call security. You know, I'm not welcome here anymore. You know, it's not my business. But
you have to remember as well the employees that you've had, and this happened to an entrepreneur who sold. He'd been so socially connected with his team that when he sold, they all moved on to the new employer because the buyer was their employer. That's where their allegiance moved on to. And him trying to get them out for afternoon drinks or take a half day off to play golf, that was all gone. That was all gone. And then they dispersed into different other pockets. So it's a tough thing. That's why, as Tim said at the very beginning, know why you're selling, what you're going to do afterwards, and then your transition is much easier.
Gary, do you want to continue on that vein, conscious of time, perhaps summarising top 5 tips that you know, quickly, you know, people should consider, and then we'll come to you, Tim, and do the same, and then we'll look to close. Yeah.
So my first tip is always be prepared to sell your business. Prepare, and the more prepared you are in terms of your financials, your operational, what you're going to do next, your team, then the better the sales process will be, the smoother the sales process will be, and the more value you'll be able to look for within your business. So preparation is number 1. And then number 2 for me is actually, as a shareholder, actually go out into the market and understand what is your market valuation for your business. What are the potential obstacles you'll have if you are to sell your business? And one important thing that people do overlook is what's your net proceeds. If you're going to sell your business for 5 million, you're going to have to pay the taxman some money. You're going to have to pay legal, taxation fees, advisory fees. So what is your net proceeds to all of that, including equity bridges, etc.? That allows you to really understand what you're looking at and what's the real number. Ensure that you have a next level management team. So if you are going to be leaving the business and you're telling buyers that you're not important or you only work part-time, make sure your next level management team are actually running the business, that they have good understanding of each department and are able at the right time to be able to stand in front of buyers and articulate exactly who they are and what they do and the value that they add. Next one would be prepared to take advice. As I said, you will step into the back seat of the car, or if you've got a 7-seater, maybe even further back. So your advisor is going to be really, really important from heads of terms all the way through to completion. and listen to them. They're there to help you, they're there to guide you, and they're there to help bridge that communication and obstacle gap between the buyer. And they can save you thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds if you can take their advice and listen to them. And I guess the final thing is ensure that you've got all your tax planning, both for the transaction and afterwards, in place. There's various different rules and regulations around entrepreneurial tax relief or business asset disposal relief. Make sure that you understand exactly what those are, and make sure they benefit you, because the last thing you want to have is some shareholders who haven't had their shares for 2 years, or don't have 5% in the business, and they think they're going to be paying 10% tax and then end up paying 40% tax. So preparation, understand the value, ensure that you have an operational functional focus, be prepared to listen and engage with your advisor, and ensure that you've got all the tax planning in advance.
All the ambiguity we've got with tax at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a fun future for some people out there. Yeah, Tim, to you.
I would say plan where you want to be. Think of what's at the end of this, so you know where you're going to with it. Beware you will upset people on the way through. That was a big thing for me, because all of your staff are having their lives changed, and just beware of that process for them. And it is a process. They've got to accept it and move forward as you sell the business. I'm trying to think of 5. What else? I would actually say take an advisor. You know, I was a specialty, you know, my specialty was internet services, MSP. My specialty wasn't selling my business to the highest bidder. I wouldn't get underneath my Audi car and do the servicing. So why do you want to be the guy that's selling the business? Why do you want to take that on? Be realistic. Be realistic about how much time it's going to take and what you're going to get for the business. And I suppose the last one is that remember, life is short. And if you are a 80-year-old working in a business, that's quite hard. So take it while you're young, is what I would say.
Well, look, I think it's a great summary. You know, there's lots to consider, and you know, it's always important to understand, you know, this is a process, and it's a path that lots of people have trodden, right? You know, there's the book, there's the rule book, the handbook, but it means different things to different people. And you know, like we said at the beginning, a lot of business owners are being encouraged to consider selling their business when they might not have even thought about it. And there is a lot to get your head around, you know, quite quickly. So, you know, hopefully for our audience today, that's given them, you know, some food for thought. You know, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Gary and Tim, for your insight. For those who joined us, you know, please feel free to contact, you know, Gary if you've got any further questions, or you'd like some insight into, you know, particular parts of the process, or indeed, you know, what is the market for them right now? You know, what could they expect? He'd be happy to take that call. But yeah, we'll look to sign off now, but dead on time. So thanks very much all for your time today, and we'll speak to you soon.
Great. Thanks, James. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.